Greetings. Okay, let me position the phone right here. And this is deep. This is really, really deep. Like really, 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 really. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Let's give honor to the source of the creator, the most high, to making all this possible. Yeah. Whoa. Dang, this is. Let's give honor to the ancestors known and unknown as well. This is gonna be really a deep dive, but also bringing a sense of awareness. I was laughing earlier about some stuff, like coming into some more clarity in this Leo full moon. I don't know if it's Leo or Cancer, but anywho, coming into some more deeper awareness. I was looking at my natal chart, and I came across a video, and it was talking about Chiron, and Chiron right now is in the is in Aries. And I'm gonna look up some stuff. Like, again, you may not study astrology, that's cool, or get into things like that, but the stars don't lie. Meaning that astrologically, the stars don't lie. And this shit outdates, predates, whatever you want to call it, predates like a lot of. This is what connects us spiritually to a lot of things, but this shit predates a lot of religion and everything else. What was I finna look up? Fuck. The meaning of Chiron. Chiron meaning. Okay, Chiron is a prominent figure in so-called Greek mythology. I don't know how much that is true, but known as the wisest and kindest of centaurs, renowned as a healer, mentor, and teacher to heroes like Achilles and Jason, often called the wounded healer, to symbolize the transformation of personal pain into wisdom and healing for others. This shit is it blows my mind because like I said, people don't have to be in it like a lot of things, but for one, it mentioned mentor and teacher and healer. A lot of these things, I feel like, as being a student of life, we all are those things. When you're can be open to learning from other people, and through your own experiences is where the wisdom comes. So Chiron, again, for me, drum roll, my Chiron is in fucking Cancer. This shit is mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing for me because I look at different natal charts, but it's mind-blowing for me as again, at a point in time, I was not looking at stuff with new awareness about this. I knew it was there, but that's the thing about gradually as your journey in life unfolds. I'm sitting here like, yo, what? Like, so yeah, let me not get distracted with some other stuff, but so let me read more. Okay, hold on. Okay, so just that right there, the wounded healer through immortal or Chiron suffered as an incurable wound from a poisoned arrow, unable to heal himself or herself. He represented the archetype of overcoming personal suffering to heal others. That's fucking deep. Now, you can research this stuff. If you're not into it, that's cool. But as the shift happens, this is very important. I realize like how much of me learning that my Chiron and a lot of what my path and, aligning with more spiritual practices or aligning more with my own journey, boy. For one, let me read what Chiron in Cancer is. I noticed how vital this is. It even like I'm gonna tell you how aligned it is. For one, my princess has a Cancer moon. And if you have been watching anything that I've been doing, I'm telling you how the fact of if that's anything I learned from her being here, it has highlighted so much of the maternal or matriarchal things ancestry, generationally, learned behavior patterns, intergenerational traumas, um, psychologically, um, narcissistic templates. I mean, things that, again, I'm learning as I embrace and accept the deeper wounds or the woundings around it, and realizing like it is a catalyst for sharing, not only just with others, but seeing the interconnectedness to share and express. So, with that, I'm realizing like how much of like how can I say this? How much our children. What I mean by guides, it's like when I say like you have guides or whatever, your children is just as much of a guide to you as well, because in your guiding them as a guardian, they're also a guardian for you as well. And that's the thing where it like they're like a shadow aspect of you, but in a healthy way. Like they mirror back to you. When I say shadow, they mirror back to you the things that you do not want to see. So if she has a moon in Cancer, like astrology wise, one thing I realize is like even in moments where I feel, because once I read the significance of Cancer, Chiron in Cancer, it's so significant to why and how karma is so beautiful and how your children come to mirror back the path of Dharma, because it's the same concept of things being one and the same, like a double entendre. That's not even what I'm trying to say, but two sides to a coin. So it's just as much it can seem like a curse. It's a gift. The feminine and masculine, like one and the same, yin and yang, or yang and yin, whatever, however you want to say it. I knew just through the experience that I've dealt with myself, her mother, and so many lessons around that. Even the fact of like how I've had to navigate of not being able to like walk into my fullness. A lot of what she came to remind me of, in like the fact of like the things that I wanted to ignore, even like how me and her mother connected, like it's not a curse. I looked at it like it was something that I was laying down with like last night, that it's no coincidence or mistake that a lot of us came into connections with people, whether it be through lust or whether it be through something karmic. Either way, or however it, was rung about, it has its significance. It has its purpose. Everything has its purpose. Everything serves its purpose. Everything has very significant, like at a point in time where I felt like things were a mistake, or, and a lot of that is carried belief systems from, what happened with mother and father or somebody before us. So that's when I was like, yo, I'm trying to put chapstick on the whole thing, don't fall out. Wipe that all. I don't know where that is. So, anywho, the beauty around all of this is that I get to talking, my lips get to get dry. But the awareness around a lot of this I'm noticing is how should I dive into this? Is that again the awareness around this is that the beauty of being able to see beyond, as I mentioned, like the saying goes, seeing the forest from the trees, a bigger picture. And in some cases where some situations where whether you are connected with someone who's not willing to go beyond their way of thinking, their narrow mindedness, or even being closed minded, or even the fact of, let's say, for instance, I had to meet her mother for significant reasons. It not only highlighted my learned behavior patterns, it also highlighted again what people have experienced in their childhood. This is the thing that, a lot of us didn't see the importance of how we were never taught or grounded in approaching and meeting certain partners or being in certain relationships. Every relationship has its significance. It's, are you able to see your role, your pattern, their pattern, and so forth? And it's not so much emphasis around why it failed. It's so much of the depths of what is the core reason why this is not as stable, secure, or balanced as it should be. What it does is highlight. So now I'm going to dive into what the fuck I have a Chiron in. I told you I have a Chiron in Cancer. Chiron in Cancer indicates a core emotional wound related to nurturing, family, childhood, in a sense of belonging. Individuals with this placement may have felt under-nurtured or misunderstood by their family, leading to deep insecurities around emotional safety and self-worth. Bruh. Even if I wanted to hide, I couldn't. And that's something else I don't know if I'm going to get into later about reading about how I have a MC in Leo. But that's, when I mean by that, that's like a natal chart thing. But it still talks about in that how I didn't even know the MC was connected to the mother. Like, and it was mentioning how, matter of fact, do I have this pulled up? I actually do. The midheaven or something like that. It talks about how the midheaven in your chart just doesn't just represent how you were mothered or nurtured, but also how you nurture a future in the course of your own life. Man. It was something else that it said about that. But it was basically mentioning how the midheaven aspect of when someone hasn't received the attention, which goes back to what I realizing in certain connections that I've had, it really has highlighted what I've noticed with a lot of partnerships or people. And it's not everyone, but I noticed like a lot of the root cause really dealt with a lot of abandonment issues or abandonment wounds. Where was it? It was, and I'm going to touch on that too a little bit more because that's been one of the biggest things that I've been actually facing or have faced or in the process of facing. Where is this at? I had no idea. I mean, I'm reading it, but I resonate with some things. Everything I don't have to agree or accept, but it's more so like what resonates with me. I'm reading more on the Leo midheaven. Like I said, receive clarity or whatever, is something like from whatever. Everything you read or whatever it is doesn't have to be true. I tell myself if it resonates on a deeper levels, like within myself, then I can, if it resonates with my core. It was something in here. But basically, it still was highlighting around the basically, like I said, it like the mother womb, because again, the feeling of being seemed like forgotten, dismissed, or unaware of these things, like a mother unaware that she doesn't know that through her inability to nurture herself and nurture her children, you're pretty much setting up a path for them to be entangled in relationships that reflect those very things, that abandonment wounds and so forth. So, okay. So let me get back to this. Uh, I'm finishing up something. I feel like this person I'm talking to is like a client. I was just telling someone how interesting it is. Like, a lot of things I'm recognizing now through my Chiron and Cancer is how I notice how I made certain decisions, um, and also see exactly why. Um, when it talks about it, it mentioned unnurtured or misunderstood by family. That's been one of the biggest things about a lot of what I was doing young, how I'm now expanding on it, through not just content creating, but naturally through being authentic. And that's a part of my MC being in Leo. It's like, realizing that in my inability at the time to be emotionally safe for myself, and now stabilizing those emotions, because I realized that a lot of the things I've learned or received was a learned behavior pattern or was embedded within me, the wounded part of Chiron. And then that healer aspect is not looking externally for someone to heal me, but to be it, to look within. And that's the thing about what a healer actually represents. It leads you, it highlights it. A person or individual, like you're in partnership or relationship, they mirror back that which you ignore. I always speak about the internal wounds, the feminine archetype, the things that we refuse to see, that literally is calling us to water, to nurture, to that which doesn't feel safe. That inner child aspect is calling you to accept what is being ignored. I always tell people what's ignored will someday fight to be acknowledged. And so that's where you see displayed in the collective, where a lot of environments, and it's not just if you just grew up in a balanced home and you had all these things, there still is a climate around the fact of the foundations of a country, of an environment that still gives off this illusion of safety. So even if you mask yourself, whatever nationality, color, and creed, there still is a unconscious narrative or a subconscious narrative that we're ignoring. So with that, one of the biggest things that I've had to recover in recovering through these internal wounds or internal things that I refuse to see, that wounded masculinity coming from a wounded femininity, I realized that this has not only reconstructed or redefined how I see emotional safety, but it also has changed and switched my whole trajectory around how I view myself, women, people, everything. And also it shows me the approach. It brings up my fears around what no longer can be, what no longer I can hide. Fear of stability. So the things about wounds, it'll bring up the fear of going beyond what you're familiar with. That stagnation or staying in something that it has been normalized for so long, and the thing about a journey, what it exposed about yourself is that you can't hide you from you, no matter how long, no matter what career, no matter what status. And one of the biggest things I realized is like in grown up environments where they were environments that were unsafe. I realized like now I've had to cut off and weed out so many people or so many things energetically that represented that unsafetyness or that deep insecurity around what it is to feel safe. And it had, and I always say like it was bigger than just having a home. It's bigger than just having a physical home. What I honestly feel like from what's going in and projecting outwardly has a lot to do with what we feel we're worthy of. This has brought a lot of clarity to situations and relationships that I was in, where if you're getting what you feel you want or you feel worthy of, meaning like certain connections and relationships and experiences, I, at a point in time, had to ask myself, if you know you deserve better, then why are you feeling like this is the all be all? And this is why a lot of us as cycle breakers, you know, and when you start to dive in things ancestrally, and where you really see a lot of your insecurities be highlighted, I start to recognize myself like, this doesn't really reflect my worth. And in that emotional safety, I realized that my worth was connected to um, my spiritual currency and even connected to my mental well-being, my emotional well-being, and my physical well-being. And if you're not, if you're in partnerships or in dynamics where you have people who are not, have not faced these internal things, I start to realize a lot of them connections that I stayed in at that moment really reflected a deeper internal dialogue of woundedness, if that makes sense. So I can see why where I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know the importance of self-worth because growing up in dynamics, I overlooked these things. I didn't think that this would catch up to me, and I didn't even think I would be as going into it as deep as I was. um, Again, trust around one of the biggest things is trust and vulnerability. Being that I realize now, coming into a deeper awareness of realizing how unnurtured I was, then I will get in connections where I wasn't nurtured, or I would overextend myself to be nurtured or receive said attention. So again, this reflected self-worth, self-concept. You know, how do I see myself? How do I view myself? And then that also reflects the fact of how do you view or how, you know, I mentioned like every man and woman holds an image of a man and father, or a man, every woman holds an image of a man in their mind's eye. And depending on how their experiences were, that pretty much shows you the trajectory of their life, especially if that man in some way wasn't some, you know, gave them a sense of healthy direction, or at the core, no matter how much he has given financially and physically, at the core of us all. And I realize the importance of me having this chiron in Cancer, because Cancer is very significant. Cancer represents the family, the home, things ancestral, the maternal, you know, matriarchal, you know, all those things that are vital to the significance of spiritual, emotional, and also the trajectory of a nation, a country, an environment, earth, because the deep aspect of community and all these things that we want to connect to is rooted in family. It's rooted in how we are nurtured. It's also rooted in a sense of belonging. And so I realize a lot of things that I talk about going to the depths of, from my perspective, and outside of just being a darker man, it's like I have to realize like I cannot overlook that which has been hidden, especially what has been rooted in the wounds of not just me, but those who come before me. And then the aspect of how that comes up with women that I have dated And every dynamic has been different, but the energy, the undercurrent is similar to where, again, um, my issues were back then with wanting to build with someone or wanting to create with someone. But a lot of these things, I didn't know the importance. It was highlighting my wounds. It was highlighting the fact of every relationship was bringing something or wanting me to see something I could no longer ignore. Didn't matter who it was. It would still bring up eventually certain patterns, learned behavior patterns, emotional safety for me, again, self-worth, what did I value, even overextending or putting myself in situations with women who had children already. You know, a place of putting myself basically in an uncompromising position. And one thing that I realized that in those dynamics where, um, let's say a woman did have a child or children, there still would be things where, in my inability to have gotten to a place where I felt emotionally safe or even secure, there would still be this power trip or struggle between like wanting attention more or wanting some type of attention more than a woman with a child. So a lot of these things I would see certain patterns in. I was like, I could never get that attention as much as I assumed I would, because not her priority was not only to herself but also to that child first, naturally, especially if that wasn't my biological child. And so these are things that, again, that and then for men who are in that position to step up and do such things, to each their own. That takes a lot of courage to take on take on, or someone who's not biologically yours. Is still a part of building, because that takes a lot of courage, security within yourself, and confidence. And so, to build on that. So, diving more deeper into this, like I said, I start to recognize more of, like, now, like, why was I had, okay, so in this, it's so interesting, in this, these are things I'm, again, learning even after having children, that you were not ready for. But it's that it wasn't you so much not ready, it was to expose the learned behavior patterns. It was to expose a part of you that you assumed that you had it all together or this and that, but it was to expose, which means what's hidden on a deeper level, on why these patterns or why connections or why certain things happen the way they do. How certain things are calling you to build, uh, rebuild what was in you, what was once denied or pushed aside when you were a child, or when you were with, um, rooted in, family dynamic, a whole bunch. I mean, the list can go on and on. I even had to look in the importance of, like, I didn't even know what emotional security was at the time. Um, and how important it is, because, again, in the inability to gain a sense of emotional safety, a lot of us don't even realize, like, how we will trauma bond through something. And when we don't realize that a person, if we're not emotionally safe for ourselves, then this is why you see certain demographics where, even myself, honestly, like, I didn't even know how to get out of certain situations, because I would get so deep into where I didn't realize how much of my emotions were connected to my finances, or me trying to regulate or learn to see beyond the fact of this isn't healthy for me. Then by that time, for some shit, I didn't even realize, like, well, how am I going to get out of this? Where am I going to go? Who am I going to call? What am I, things as such, because, again, going back to the fact of even foundations of structures being built upon things that are the opposite of providing emotional security or providing safe environments, because, again, the country, these foundations centered around control, manipulation, and so forth, that this is the thing where I come in and hold people who are leadership, people who proclaim politicians, whomever it is, community leaders and so forth, where the divine and myself as a vessel hold them accountable for the injustice of being so consumed by their greed and by their power-driven ego and so forth, to realize that you've created a false identity around what it is to be stable. You've created a narrative that doesn't reflect authenticity. It doesn't respect and honor those who are vulnerable, those who are authentic, those who live in integrity. It isn't a system that has created trust and stability for people. It isn't a system that respects and honors open communication. Because when I look at emotional security, it simply says it is a profound internal sense of safety, stability, and self-acceptance that allows an individual to be authentic, vulnerable, and confident without fear of rejection, judgment, or abandonment. Now that right there, when you look at the climate of hold on one second, I think I may have to move possibility. Even when you look at the climate of, again, I always highlight the fact of not just the climate of what has happened in this country, but I always go back to the origins, or like when you're talking about the matriarchal indigenous women. There has not been anything highlighted around providing them with emotional safety and security. One moment. So yeah, I had to reposition myself. A lot of shit going on, boy. Okay. I feel like I was still talking about highlighting the importance of emotional security, and especially again when you go to the root of who it has affected, and then how it has had a ripple effect on everyone that is connected to them. And the reason I speak from this perspective is because as a man that is darker, I have to first look at the roots of that. What has happened around the fact of what is stability for me, how it has affected everyone, and looking at the systems that have been in place, such as things as systematic racism, things that can no longer be prolonged when it comes to prolonged or, grief. This is the thing that a lot of people haven't accepted within them. This is why you have so much repressed anger or rage around certain things as such, because these are women who are affected still to these days. My mother, my grandmother, those of you that have, and this is, and I'm predominantly speaking about this country, present from my experience of people who in their ability to try to be authentic, battling with what I talked about before, prolonged grief has a lot to do with people not knowing how to ever have the room to accept what has happened to them. So this is where complex PTSD comes in, where you've had repetitive experiences, traumatic experiences happen for people, and now they only know how to repeat patterns of those repeated traumas, and or those suppressed traumas or intergenerational patterns and so forth. So when you're talking about how even the matriarch in its entirety, not just darker women or certain women, I'm just talking about the matriarchal, the silencing of the matriarchal, and then even how women have been in position to keep other women silenced by the structure they have built. See, in this collapse of people, of certain things systematically, whether it be structural racism, whatever it is built upon, abuse of power, this is going to highlight again the the fears of people being rejected for speaking their truth, highlight judgment, abandonment wounds, of just people wanting to be vulnerable about who it is they are, whether it's centered around their safety, their emotional safety, their sexuality, so many different things. And again, a lot of structures that have been in place to attack that, such as things like religiously, attacking people because of their sexual preferences. There's a lot of things when it comes to the fact of people wanting to just live or feel a sense of belonging, because that's another thing why I talk about this topic in this realm of things, because one of the biggest things I recognize with Chiron and Cancer is a sense of belonging. I talk about this all the time because when you don't have a person who feels safe within themselves, or even environments and people who don't know what it is to encourage people to be in their authenticity, to feel a sense of belonging, this can affect a child or person completely different. Then when you see a person or people who have communities that they're built, again, around false empowerment, teaching their kids that you're safe, you're this and that, and only creating it for them. So in the collapse of these systems are going to highlight, again, a false sense of stability that would really reflects themselves. To build a world around division it screams everything but stability. So yeah. And so with that, that's just, and as I'm saying this, I'm like getting the message and so forth. But other than that, it again, the wound could look like a lot of fears of abandonment and emotional security. So when you see systems built upon that, it has a lot to do with the fact of a lot of us, me personally, not having nurturing upbringing. So what that pattern can play out through relationships. It can play out through trauma bonds with people, whether it was with a mother or father or somebody, and then unconsciously taking these learned behavior patterns into something else, workspaces and so forth, where again, a lot of these structures have been created to attack and make people feel like they should fear the consequences of being vulnerable, being authentic, feeling a sense of belonging. And if I'm gonna be very quite, frank with it, or be honest, this is most of society. And so with that, again, with having this placement, it really highlights again some of my deepest insecurities around what it is to feel emotionally safe, and how I haven't felt emotionally safe with certain people, or they mirror that back. And that has a lot to do with coming into your confidence, self-confidence, or building that self-esteem or self-worth around knowing that you are worthy of something better, something that's more aligned with harmony, peace, security, that doesn't threaten, that doesn't threaten your sense of well-being. And it's interesting that I bring that up, because when I look at people who have created a narrative around this is where you can see a lot of power struggles come in, is where a lot of patterns where, again, I can honestly say I brung upon myself, because the fact of I wanted to ignore the signs. I wanted to ignore the fact of this person really can't offer me something that I've never given myself. So a lot of things where I realized, like, the fears of abandonment, the fears of self-worth, the fears of so many different things that were rooted in deep insecurities had a lot to do with things that were unaddressed in childhood. Not knowing how to maintain relationships, because again, this goes back to what primary caregivers, like prime meaning the beginning, what really happened there to why your needs wasn't met. These are things that, again, let me see here, the wound of primary wound of chironic cancer centers on the needs of emotional securities and fears of abandonment. That was one of the biggest things. Like, again, a lot of things where I had to face within myself to step out, to realize like everything is going to be okay. Honoring the emotions that come up around that, like not knowing what I was going to do, how I was going to do it, and so forth. Where's the support going to come from? And again, this reflects the fact of a lot of these patterns, a lot of these things internally I was holding on to, or um, again, the base of what we grew up in, like needs never being met. You know, when you're dealing with an abandonment wound, where you nurtured, you know, certain needs that were never met when you were young. So guess what ends up happening? I realized most of my life outside of when I start to get um, awareness around why I got into certain relationships, why patterns that follow me into creating children, why I stepped into this and why I wanted to do this, simply because of what? Survival, poverty mentality, fears of being abandonment, jumping into another relationship because never really addressing what happened previously. So another thing is trust and vulnerability. Individuals may build emotional walls to protect themselves, leading to tendencies to sabotage relationships to avoid getting closer or becoming vulnerable. Whew, this shit, hey bro, reading this stuff be having me like realizing how much I was easily trusting people. And that's the thing about easily trusting people with our hearts, easily trusting people um, with 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 our livelihood, and then getting into something where all of that is jeopardized or you sabotage it and you don't know how to sustain it. And even the vulnerability around how I would get into things and overextend emotionally or try to fix everything about the person or individual and neglecting myself through the experience. And the desperation trying to hold on because of, well, I didn't know where I was going to live and where I was going to go and so forth. And then that has a lot to do with self-worth, feeling like you deserve better. And going back to what belonging, that really reflects a lot of belonging in the body, feeling safe, feeling stable within the body, because that's where it starts. I realized like dissociating from the mind, body, and spirit, and even unprocessed things from emotions can have one feeling like, well, where do I really belong? You know, you feel lost in the world. You don't feel a sense of safety. And that's big, especially for a man. Doesn't matter my stature, but being a darker man or just being a man, period. It's like when you don't fit in or you don't try to be a part of the crowd or whatever it is that you feel like, well, where do I belong? If I'm having these people in this, if you don't feel like you belong in your family because you're choosing to be different, you're choosing to study different things or dive deeper more about yourself, you have different belief systems or whatever it is, and now you're outcast or a black sheep. Trying to find a place within yourself. Even with that, it's like it goes deeper, like trying to stabilize yourself emotionally, mentally, financially, and then try to find a sense of belonging, because yes, you can go buy a house, you can go buy a property, you can do whatever. Then there's the awareness around, well, hey, where's the support going to come from? Or that goes back to trust and vulnerability, like letting people know like this is what's happening with me and so forth. And again, it's the belonging aspect, because you can live in a community where people who are not too fond of people that are darker, who have belief systems on, again, have masking themselves for so long, who have created environments and even their community. So when you move in or you don't look a certain way, have a certain thing, and so it's so many different things that plays into more than just like belonging. It really reflects like within yourself. And this has been the thing that was highlighted even in some of my relationships, where you'll find yourself through overextending, trying to prove your existence. And that's been very challenging just as a man that is darker and trying to live beyond just highlighting his skin color or his struggle and so forth. Is that I just want to feel like I belong or feel safe. And I'm realizing like it really starts within, with facing those fears around that, those subconscious things, those experiences with people, realizing that a lot of things doesn't belong to you. A lot of things they're dealing with, a lot of fears, a lot of their background, their belief systems. So that can be one thing that can be kind of like drive people away from even stabilizing something with someone, because their inability to acknowledge what keeps them in this stagnation, or keeps them in this place of feeling like they're safe, or they're safe for the time being, really is a mask that's going to be revealed eventually through uncomfortability, through false identity, false empowerment, structures that we're seeing now collapse that really don't uphold, I should say, standards of matriarchal and patriarchal, being emotionally safe, physically safe, mentally, and on all levels. So let me see here. I didn't even read this part, but it was telling me about how the healing journey, the gift of the wounded healer. I gotta read this for myself. This is something I've been walking into, actually. Self-nurturance. True healing comes from the learning to mother and reparent oneself by practicing radical self-love and self-care. And I'm glad I read this, because at this moment, like when you're going through a shift and when you come to self-awareness of certain relationships and experiences where you're realizing like you have the opportunity to do these things, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to someone else, that you're being called to create from a different space, or create from a space that doesn't make sense. And that comes with a different approach in life. And I'm realizing like that's what I'm coming to the self-realization. That's why in certain connections where I was focusing on really the healing journey, and it really highlighted in certain connections, experiences, that sometimes like that can cause a connection or relationship to fall away because that person may not prioritize that, or they not wanting to support, because again, they can be distracted or more focused on other things, which again, to each their own. They can be more focused on providing or working or whatever. And what I've noticed, that where a split can happen is like through your healing journey, you're naturally going to focus more on that and pour into yourself. Like it says, self nurturance. Like that's going to be more of a priority than someone. And I've noticed this, like to where that person may not get the opportunity to do those things, and not to say they don't have the opportunity, they just haven't, they just don't prioritize it. And I've learned like through this transition, like doors close and other ones open, because it can be very difficult for that person to accept, to see someone which to the world will be perceived as just being lazy, just sitting around, and they don't realize you're building on something, a vision that they don't even realize you're a part of. But that goes through self-acceptance, because I'm recognizing in certain connections and relationships that people aren't on their journey. They haven't been on their journey. They want to tell themselves that. But that's the thing that exposes and makes the mask fall, is that where you see that people have distracted themselves or bought into the program of not knowing how to balance themselves pouring into themselves or reparenting themselves, as it said, mothering yourself. And what can happen is that this is what can cause certain relationships to, if y'all want to say fail, but really it's just the other individual being able to evolve and stabilize things. And to someone that can look like, well, how are you going to build, or how is this going to prepare you, and da 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 da. But that's the bigger picture. Because for some, in certain dynamics, the individual who does not prioritize the same thing that you does, or core values and value what you do, it will, again, I've noticed how it can create resentment, or it can create something where more unstable, or highlight what's unstable within that person. And then the person that is on the healing journey will recognize that you've healed past that version. And that's where it can seem like, for some, heartbreak or some experience to where you're realizing like, hey, that's where the self-acceptance comes in, like allowing things to just unfold for what it is and not holding on to what's familiar. And that's when signs start to come, like things start to come up and out, and you start to realize like, it's just something that it's protection, divine protection, and it's also brings awareness around boundaries, setting boundaries, whatever you went through in that connection, transforming that pain into wisdom. Like, what did this teach me? Being able to hold space for the version of you while you were in there, now being able to hold space and like show up for yourself more. So a lot of these things we see as heartbreak really be divine protection, divine intervention. And I'm telling you, it's scary sometimes because, I've been in an experience where I don't even know what's going to happen, but I have this knowingness like, okay, all of this is happening for a reason. Or am I going to make preparations? Because that's just the beauty of being able to develop empathy for yourself and the other person. Because it hit me the other day, I was like, you know what, this person's hurting. And sometimes when like, I've been on the opposite end to where I was the one who was unaware of how things were affecting people. And now I've been on the receiving end. I was a giver at a point in time, but I was now like learning how receiving, like, this is what's outdated. I don't know, like at the time I wanted to question it, but this is what no longer resonates. And so that's the beauty of internal growth. That's the beauty of realizing that whatever said intentions that you set it months ago, years ago, and so forth, this is preparation. And the reason why I say it's scary, because all sorts of feelings, because this is the thing I tell you, like with Chiron and Cancer, it highlights the importance of family for me. Abandonment wounds, no longer abandoning myself. And so emotional boundaries, I've had to learn that even through the fact of like dissolving that emotional unhealthy attachment to connections, to relationships, to stemming from my mother, because again, this is where it began and this is also where it ends. So now I realized, like, in my overgiving, I realized this was coming from a place of unmet needs. And some things we don't see just right then and there. It has to happen because this is the balance between showing up for self, which is self-care, self-love. And this is the beauty in the wounded healer aspect, from the wound being the pain and the healer being the wisdom, being able to see the wisdom from the scar, the thing that once caused you your own pain, or the pain that that person was calling, and realizing like, okay, I gotta accept this. This is what it is, and this no longer serves me. So that's the beauty of moving forward. So again, the reason I come on here and share these things is because I realize, like, it has made a lot of sense to how my life has unfolded. I don't feel shame and guilt around it, because it was just literally preparing me for that which I ignored at a time. And then on a grander scale, like on all levels, I'm able to connect again that ancestral wound to indigenous people or people from all walks of life that maybe have experienced or have yet to experience what it is to be emotionally stable and what those things reflect, to lead people in this awakening or enlightenment of, as this happens, you're going to reinvent or redefine what not only emotional safety is, but that will reflect from inward to outward. Like that can be relocating a different home, a different experience, coming out of a marriage, relationship, how you approach yourself, and then how you approach your children. So many different other things to where, again, these things are to be brought up to show you the parts of yourself that either were not nurtured or not supported. And that's a big thing I recognize even around not feeling a sense of belonging when you didn't get support from immediate family or people. That's been a big thing for me because, again, like I didn't know where certain shit was gonna come. I didn't know where how things were gonna play out. I just in my learning how to become more emotionally stable and start to recognize these childhood traumas or experiences, it has brought me more of a sense of belonging. I'm realizing like why a lot of patterns have played out the way they did, like I said. And I share these things because it's a part of the shift, and it's a part of also learning now to build more community from a more healthy and stable place, and a sense of belonging. And it's been different in certain connections. Like I realized that whether dealing with someone who had I call it self-hatred, but a racist family, from a person who dealt with a father transitioning and them not ever knowing like the fact of how self-worth around that. A lot of, even when they talk about emotional safety and security, a sense of belonging could look distorted when someone has dealt, let's say, with sexual or abuse or abuse in itself. If they're not aware, they'll actually believe that belonging in something dysfunctional is actually normal or actually something that is stable. But again, that's just learned behavior patterns to where it'll continue until it gets to a place of someone or people feeling like, this has to end here now and so forth. So that this is again a lot of which I start to recognize even more. I was never misunderstood by family. They misunderstood me in a way, but it had a lot to do with their beliefs, their inability to feel secure. And as I became aware of this, I started to recognize like I was supposed to be removed out of environments because it was going to eventually highlight these very things that I'm talking about. Because if I'm here to transform the pain into wisdom, then that means the approach, the experience, the reality changes around that. What family is, what, self-worth, emotional safety. I recognize like I'm here to shift that perspective. Because if you grew up in a dysfunctional family, they will make it seem like that is what you're supposed to go through. And that's far from the truth. And this is where you build your self-confidence and self-worth around that which was dehumanized you or wasn't valuable is valuable now. Your values change basically. Your sense of belonging, you don't feel like you belong somewhere anymore, and you'll recognize a pattern and be like, you know what? Everything's gonna work out in my favor. I'm gonna trust the divine. It is what it is, and so forth. So I feel like that's everything I really want to cover because, again, this is things that I'm still navigating through. And that's the beauty of it. So, um, yeah. Yeah. I got to do some more research on stuff now 'cause I'm learning more as I look into it. So, y'all take care of yourself. Peace and blessings. Shalom.